We're going to stay in the Old Testament again this week. In Exodus, and Exodus is one that's familiar to most of us in terms of some of the stories that are in it. So we're looking at Exodus 33, 12 through 23. Moses said to the Lord, "See, you have said to me, bring up the people, but you have not let me know whom you will send with me. Yet you have said, I know you by name, and you have also found favor in my sight. Now if I have found favor in your sight, show me your way so that I may know you and find favor in your sight. Consider too that this nation is your people." He said, "My presence will go with you, and I will give you rest." And he said to him, "If your presence will not go, do not carry us up from here. For how shall it be known that I have found favor in your sight, and I and your people, unless you go with us? In this way we shall be distinct, I and your people, from every people on the face of the earth." The Lord said to Moses, "I will do the very thing that you have asked, for you have found favor in my sight, and I know you by name." Moses said, "Show me your glory, I pray." And he said, "I will make all my goodness pass before you, and will proclaim before you the name, the Lord. And I will be gracious to whom I will be gracious, and will show mercy on whom I will show mercy." But, he said, "You cannot see my face, for no one shall see me and live." And the Lord continued, "See, there is a place by me where you shall stand on the rock. And while my glory passes by, I will put you in a cleft of the rock, and I will cover you with my hand until I have passed by. Then I will take away my hand, and you shall see my back, but my face shall not be seen." When I was a freshman in college, I got the dreaded mononucleosis. Who knows what that is? It's called the kissing disease, right? So, now there are two well-known facts about me that probably most of you do not know yet. There are two things that I hate more than anything, and I know that hate is a strong word to be using in church, but I dislike them very strongly, we'll put it that way. One is eating noises. The chewing that people make when they're chomping on gum or when they're eating their food, it drives me up a wall. And the second is that I'm actually a big germaphobe when it comes to sharing food. I don't share drinks, I don't share food, and you know that time at the end of the meal where you're passing around the dessert, and you're always fighting over who takes that last bite? I can guarantee you it will never be me, because I know how many forks have been in that dessert before it got to me. No way possible. And so when I got mono, it was a little confusing because I don't eat after people, and that's how you get it. And in fact, to this day, well, I mean, I haven't talked to him lately, but to this day, as far as I know, my boyfriend at the time still swears that I cheated on him because there is no way that I got it from him either. One thing, I have no clue how I got mono, but what happened after this was that all of a sudden you would think that I just got Ebola. Because my roommate moved out, my voice teacher kicked me out of the studio, I was quarantined from all other people. I do not know why mono was such a big deal, but because of these events, I went without a voice teacher the second semester of my freshman year. So when auditions came up for a solo in the big spring concert, I knew for sure that there was no way they would pick me. I didn't even have a voice teacher. I wanted to go after it, but I doubted whether or not it was even possible that I would get it. This was a huge solo. It was two choirs combined. It was the audition choir and the non-audition choir, and I was in the non-audition choir. And we were also going to be doing this performance with the symphony orchestra, so it was huge. We were going to go and perform in this the big concert hall down at USC, which seats about 2,400 people. And I was just nervous. There was no way that I was good enough for this thing. So auditions came up, and of course I stayed firmly in my seat as they came up. And finally, my choir director said, "No, I want all of you to go audition." And so I went ahead and auditioned, and turns out I got one of the solos. I got the mezzo-soprano solo. So it came time for rehearsals, and I was sitting there, and I was under very strict, specific instructions that when my part came up in this long, huge, long piece, that I was to stand up, sing my part, and sit back down. And so it comes time for my part. I stood up, and out of the corner of my eye, I see that another girl had stood up. And so I went ahead and let her sing the solo because I thought, there's no way. It was a mistake after all. They didn't pick me. There's no way that they picked a freshman in the non-audition choir for this huge solo. And so I sat back down, and I was really embarrassed. I was like, man, I thought I had it. And so I went up to my choir director afterwards. I was like, what happened? And he's like, well, she was actually the one who misunderstood. She was picked to do your part for a different performance, for a smaller performance. But we really want you to do it. But she's a little upset because she's a senior and you're a freshman. And so I just want you to know that you have to do it perfectly and memorize the next time that this comes across, or we will have to give it to her. And so being a freshman, obviously, I was covered in doubt. How in the world was I ever going to get this part? How was I going to be able to perform perfectly? No one performs perfectly. How in the world? And so I went to the rehearsal, and I worked really hard and went to the rehearsal and stood up and had everything memorized and did it perfectly, and they finally did award me this solo. And so it is now my one claim to musical fame, my one, that I have sung a solo in front of 2,400 people, besides someone who is now a professional opera singer singing with the Met. My one claim to fame. You know, I got to brag about it every chance that I can get because I only have one. But I treasured every moment of it. It was the best experience of my life in terms of music because I got this chance to sing a solo in front of this huge packed crowd. No one ever gets to do that. And if I had sat firmly in my chair, there is no way that I would have had that chance. There's a risk to standing up when your part comes. And if it hadn't been for my choir director believing in me, I never would have stood up. I would have been paralyzed. I'm sure every last one of you can tell me some similar story where doubt in yourself or someone else has been detrimental. Maybe they've left you paralyzed in your seat. Maybe it was that time you bought your first house. I was shocked when I bought mine about how much paperwork you actually do have to do. How many times that you initial your name when it comes to those mortgage papers. You're at the table signing these 500 sheets of paper, and you're wondering if you really can afford it. Or maybe it was that time that you changed jobs. You were wondering, you know, things were pretty bad at your current job, but you were wondering if that next job was going to be any better. Maybe it was that time that you were poised over your checkbook trying to figure out if you really do have enough money to tithe. And the answer to that is always yes, by the way, just coming from a pastor. I'm sure every last one of you has had some time of doubt. And you're not alone. All of us have had doubts about something. Maybe your doubt is with God directly. Maybe you don't know if He's really there. Maybe you don't know if He's really leading you in the right place. And so we get to this story about Moses, and we know about Moses. We know the call of Moses was a big one. We have been singing since the time that we were children, the Pharaoh, let my people go. We know Moses well, and we know that his call was a big one. But Moses was doubting God. Yes, even Moses doubted God. God commands Moses and gives him promises. Go, leave this place, go to this land of which I have promised. God says go, but Moses isn't quite ready yet. He responds, you say to go, but you haven't told me who you're sending with me. You see, Moses wanted to know the plan. God was telling him to go, but he didn't know exactly what that would entail. Will someone have his back? Who exactly is going with me? Am I sure that I want these people to go with me? Maybe it's someone else. Can I have some choice in the matter? God says go. And God responds, I am with you. Moses responds again, if you're not going with us, don't send me. Now, if I were God, I'd want to punch Moses right about now. Luckily, I'm not God. I just told you I'm going with you, and yet you're asking me again. Instead, God answers with patience. You have found favor. I am here. So once again, Moses responds a third time. Okay, well, show me your glory. Finally, when we think maybe God has had enough, he responds with a deal. Okay, I'll show you my glory, but I won't show you my faith. Now, this seems an odd phrase to us to think about but this happens today all the time. We now get the chance to see reflections of God. We get to see God in the flowers and the sunsets. We get to see God in acts of love and kindness. We get to see God in all sorts of ways and shapes, but we don't get to see God's face. And the meaning of this is Moses doesn't get to see God's every thought. He doesn't get to see the entire plan. You see, if he did see the entire plan, there wouldn't be faith. Faith, by its very definition, is this idea that we don't know for sure, but we'll still believe. We don't know where we're going. We don't know how the money is going to come through. We don't know who is going with us. We don't know the entire plan. And so we have to put our faith in God because God's plans are for him to know and to reveal to us in God's time. If we knew God's plans up front, we wouldn't have free will. Think about it this way, parents. Most of y'all are parents. How many of you made your kids pick up their toys for themselves? Why don't you just pick them up for them? I mean, other than the fact that there will be a lot of picking up and you need some help, I'm looking forward to kids picking up after themselves because I've heard that's what happens all the time, right? But part of it is because having your kids pick up their own toys to clean up their own mess builds character. It builds responsibility. It builds respect. Your kids technically, they have the choice whether or not they pick up their toys, but ultimately you hope that they will. You know that it's what's best for them even when they don't quite understand. And we all know that phrase. Why? Because I told you. We are God's children, and sometimes we want to know why we're being asked to pick up our toys. We don't want to follow the instructions. We doubt whether or not it will really get us to where we want to be. God could pick up our mess for us. He has that power. But then God wouldn't be merciful. God's grace isn't grace without our ability to reject it. But still, we doubt. And it's okay to doubt. Doubt is normal. Doubt is what makes us human. We see God's reaction to Moses. He doesn't get mad. He doesn't throw his wrath down at him. He's very even-keeled. He's forgiving. He knows that Moses will doubt because Moses is human. Doubt in itself is not evil. But you'll notice even through doubt, Moses still continues to move forward. Even as he's doubting, he asks questions of God. He is coming to God. He's asking for assistance. His doubt doesn't make him turn away from the problem. It just makes him engage it more actively. You see, doubt isn't bad. But letting it keep you frozen or worse, walk away, that is bad. You see, some of you either have or will use doubt to justify standing still. You'll say, I read the Bible once and I didn't get anything out of it. I know I'm supposed to, but maybe it won't bring me closer to God. So you'll stop. Or you'll say, the last time I gave 10% of my money, I didn't get anything out of it. The church spent it on things I didn't really want them to. I'd rather them spend it the way that I'm telling them to spend it. So you stop giving. Or maybe it'll be something like when you say, I don't know if inviting that person to church will get me anywhere. They'll probably just say no anyway. Or if they come, they probably won't like it anyway. Or I don't know if being kind and forgiving and gracious will give me what I want in the end. Or the worst, in my opinion at least. I don't know if saying, I'm sorry, I was wrong, will make me look bad. Allowing doubt into these types of areas of our lives is allowing doubt to block our hearts from the Spirit that is trying to move through us. Friends, I can tell you something. None of these thoughts are necessarily bad. They aren't good, but the thoughts aren't necessarily bad. But it's what you do with them that will determine whether or not you've allowed evil to overtake your life. You see, when we doubt, it's like the devil can smell blood on the water. All of a sudden, our doubt is a tiny crack in the door for the devil to enter. And by saying things like, I'd rather not, I know that that's what God's calling me to do, but I'm okay here, you're swinging the door wide open for the devil to get in. Y'all, I know that we've been talking about being a welcoming church lately, about welcoming those who walk in our doors and those who are outside of our doors. It's a great thought, but let me tell you something. The devil's not welcome here. Stop opening the door. When we take those thoughts, those tiny seeds of doubt, those moments of I don't know if this will work out the way I want it, and embrace them, it's like we've thrown a big potluck dinner for the devil. Here you go. Come right in. I know some of you are a little nervous. It's probably most of you have ever heard of the devil at a Methodist church, but it's okay. We'll get through it together. It's fine. Because from the beginning of time, since Adam and Eve, we have been inviting evil into the world with our actions. Adam and Eve started it, eating from one tree God said not to. Why? Because they had doubt in God. And the devil saw an opportunity and he leapt for it. The grace and mercy of God is that he has allowed us from the beginning of time to open the door. We have a choice. But sometimes we choose wrong. You know, sometimes I wonder if we open that door because we doubt if we are good enough to follow God. Sometimes I wonder if we doubt that God has created us good. We think that God's glory certainly can't shine through us, so we're okay with living in our own sin, our own evil. This is the best I can do, we say. I'll settle for this. I can't do any better. Nobody can expect me to do better. God doesn't expect us to be perfect, but he does ask for our best. So God chose to create each and every one of us. He chose to give us life. He chose to give us free will, and then he chose to die for us, every last one of us. He chose you and me and all of us to spread around that gospel to others. Nobody is too good for God. Nobody is too bad. But we were all chosen, every last one of us. And in case you're wondering, I'm not just talking about us in this room, but every last person who walks on this earth has been chosen by God. He chose in his goodness to extend his grace on us so that we could become closer to him. There's this thing that we call the priesthood of all believers. It means that in theory, we would never need to have preachers and pastors and priests and deacons, because all of us, every last one of us, is called to be preacher and pastor and priest and deacon. We use language in ordination about being called and set apart to be ordained. Sometimes it's my opinion that we should use that language more in baptism. Because through our baptism, we are called and set apart to be a preacher and a pastor and a priest and a deacon and a servant and a leader and evangelism or an evangelist. You are all called, you are all chosen. Just because you are on this earth, God created you to love others and to be loved. So don't let your doubt stop you from that mission. Amen.